ghouls and fiends, welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror, your one-stop shop for all your ghoul-tastic, ghoul-infested treats of the week. Probably should have prepared something there. I went off the cuff, didn't work. We move on. We move on. We try these new things. We see what sticks. Throw enough shit at the wall and something will. Anyway, I'm your host as per usual, Tez. Welcome back. This is another of our recorded shows. It's a sunny and kind of warm, but I'm not going to complain too warm, day here in the UK. Current time of recording is 5 PM on Friday the 9th of August, just in case you cared about any of that nonsense. Had a good show. Had a good show last week. We did a couple of streams. Actually, it would have been just the one stream, but time ticked on. A lot of that's probably down to my rambling. Hey, that's what I do. That might be part of the reason why you're here. I don't know. But we did a long show. We ended up having a little look-see at the first two Silent Hill games, and it's one of those things where I'd kind of been beating myself up a little bit in the day, thinking, I haven't prepared a featured presentation. And I want to do a featured presentation. That's kind of part of the parcel of doing the live shows, is to kind of separate that from the pre-recorded by way of having a featured presentation and then having more of a focus on a retro review on these recorded shows. But then the idea just kind of came to me because I kind of thought back to the Resident Evil show, and I had a hell of a lot of fun talking about that because it's something that has a lot of nostalgia for me and reminds me of formative memories, not just in terms of gaming, but also, my love of horror, my connection to how I first got the first Silent Hill game through my my lovely dearly departed mother. And those are always, good memories to come back. It's weird to speak fondly about playing a desolate hellscape game where you transition from a foggy nightmare to an absolute, H.P. Lovecraft, Hellraiser, Clive Barker, dimension of terror. But hey, we take comfort in the things that we love, and we love horror. So there we go. So I did have a lot of fun with that. I think it's something where I'm probably going to have to start earmarking future entries, not just in Silent Hill, but in terms of future horror franchises to discuss, video game-wise, that is. I mean, those are the ones that stick out to me in terms of Resident Evil and Silent Hill because they're the ones that I dipped into the most when I was growing up. I never touched Dino Crisis. I dabbled here and there in other horror games, but I suppose those are the ones that really stuck out to me. Because a lot of the horror games, especially more these days, just a bit too much, a bit too much kind of hiding. I could maybe talk Alone in the Dark, but I've only played one entry, which was, I think it was called New Nightmare. It was the entry that came out on the PS1, PS2. I want to say PS2. And I briefly played about 5 minutes of the one that came out on the Xbox 360, which looked just terrible. It was all episodic, which just didn't really kind of fit for me. But maybe at one point I'll take another trip down memory lane and look into those other games. But then that could be something for this much discussed, although not so much recently, video gaming podcast. I think when I am not doing so much overtime regularly with work and studying, I will sit down one weekend and kind of map out, this video game show and what I want to talk about. Is it purely retro focused, new game focused? Will I take the format of Ministry of Horror and talk about, a bit of gaming news? Will it just be a solo show? Maybe I reach out to some of my video game cohorts to come on as a guest. Who knows? But yeah, that's something for another time. But it's very much still on my mind. I mean, I'd need to source some decent, music that won't get copyright struck. I could just record something myself, but I can't be asked. But that's another avenue. But we did do a bit of video gaming. We jumped into Silent Hill 3. So I'd picked up the Silent Hill HD collection, Silent Hill 2 and 3 for like £20 on the Xbox. I'm tempted to give Silent Hill 2 a go and just see how I get on revisiting it. I only played it once. I thought the graphics looked great. I thought the story was good, but I just felt a bit dissatisfied by the end of it. As I mentioned on the previous show, it just felt like it was quite easy, which for me, I like easy, but you know, these days I like easy in terms of I just want a good story. That time it felt like I'm just sort of walking through the game without any peril. And I guess in a horror game, you do need to feel that you are mortal and that you're not going to just get out of every scenario. Didn't really feel like that from memory, and it did feel like I'd kind of completed it fairly quickly. Similar sort of feeling to playing the remake of Resident Evil 3. Picked that up, I completed it in about 2 nights, about 2 nights. I started playing it one evening, kind of carried on for a while. I think I was done in like maybe 4 hours. For a £40 game, that's £10 an hour. That's not great. Looked great, good action in it, but it was just a bit too short. So it's just finding that good balance, and I felt I can't remember how much my runtime was. This is going back 20 odd years for Resident Evil 2. Felt a bit short, so maybe I'll dive into that. But we did do a bit of a stream of Resident Evil 3, first time gameplay for me, and yeah, it was pretty fun as it got going. I have to, preface with as it got going because it's a HD remaster. It's not a remake. So basically, it's just got a sheen up. Well, it basically doesn't have CRT scan lines, but in terms of HD versions, I'm just sort of addressing my exposure because it looked incredibly dark. In terms of HD remakes, remasters, I should say, bare minimum. I feel it was probably, I didn't buy it at launch, and it's never really come down that much in price. So I did kind of feel, my screen's now way too bright. I did kind of feel a little bit like, if this game was £15, sure, £22, whatever it was I spent on it. I mean, you can't really complain too much because the grand scheme of things, it's. You compare it to a brand new AAA game, which is like £70 now, then it doesn't really compare, but still. We played that, had a bit of fun, may jump back into it. We've still got Still Lies the Deep. I can never remember the flipping title of that game to play, but I haven't yet found a single player game, horror specific I should say, that has caught my attention fully. I haven't completely given up on Alan Wake 2. So maybe we'll stream that, but maybe I'll just keep that as a game for myself, to not have to stream, because when streaming you kind of feel like you have to obviously talk, because otherwise it's just watching a game being played and someone silently sitting there and watching it. But I guess when it's narrative focused, I tend to just want to be absorbed in the story and listen to that and focus. So it probably doesn't translate that well to stream. I don't know. I'm no expert on game streaming. I probably have the most fun doing Football Manager, which unfortunately there's not really much crossover with horror there. I guess it depends on how the teams play. Anyway, film-wise, we have a few reviews to do today. First off, I have to give a shout out to Eddie Hickey. Eddie put in the Discord, the Wrestling Arena Discord, there's the sub-channel for Ministry of Horror, a BBC News article about a Scottish horror film that has been finally released after 17 years after it had finished filming. It's a very interesting article. You can check it out. Go on BBC News, just Google it. The film's called The Bench, and that film is now available on Prime. I have now watched it. I will review it, give my thoughts, but I read the article, and it did give me a lot of, I guess, fond parallel memories for my time making films. Which, when I say my time, that time isn't over. We're taking a pause. Currently focusing on saving for a wedding and paying off things and bits and bobs. So the camera equipment is for the time being gone. because it was just sitting around gathering dust. But yeah, I will get new camera equipment at some point in the future when sensible, essentially. Get back into the filmmaking. But yeah, reading this article, it did just elicit a lot of memories for making films with Peter Goddard. So I've watched that. We also have a review for a newish film called The Bell Keeper, which is also available on Prime. And then for the retro review, I've had a little look-see because I have the Prime channels of Shudder and Arrow. Shudder hasn't really had anything new on for a few weeks. I had a little scroll. Most of the things I've never either seen or not interested in so far. Had a little scroll through Arrow. There's a lot of crossover in terms of the film availability. But one stuck out to me because I've seen the Blu-ray release available and thought the artwork looked really cool, but I don't really know anything about the film. So our retro review today for Arrow is the Lucio Fulci film Demonia. We're going to talk about that. We're going to go through my thoughts on that. I didn't know anything going into it, but I am pretty familiar with Lucio Fulci. I think I've got a book based on his works. Do I have a book based on his works? Or is it Mario Bava? I think it's Lucio Fulci. Yeah, Zombie 2. There we go. I had to remind myself. But it's an amazing book. It's currently in our storage because it's so flippin' massive and I don't really have a proper book storage area. I've got kind of, things here and there, but this book just takes up far too much space. So, very interesting director. But that was a first-time watch for me. We're going to talk about that. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump into our horror news. This is the news. Ho, 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 ho.
You hang up on me again, I'll cut you like a fish, understand?
Prime drinking time there, prime drinking time. Getting some BCAAs. Had a rest day from the gymnasium this morning. But it's good to keep on top of the BCAA intake. This is the Rich Piana blend. Which I get from my local protein shop, SNC Supplements, here in sunny Leighton Buzzard. Anyway, just a cheap plug for them because I really like supporting independent business, which I think is important to do. So, as per usual, all of our horror news comes from bloodydisgusting.com. Shout out to them. Great site, great news source. And their Twitter account, I often see things that grab my attention. So, first up in the horror news, and their page has just died in front of me. From John Squires, 5 new horror movies releasing this week, including Cuckoo. So let's just jump into it. First up, with the short film Steamboat Willie from 1928 in the public domain, horror filmmakers, fuck's sake, are now free to play around with that early incarnation of Mickey Mouse, and that's exactly what director Jamie Bailey is doing in the new indie slasher movie The Mousetrap. Gravitas Ventures releases The Mousetrap on VOD this past Tuesday, so it's out now. In the horror movie, it's Alex's 21st birthday, but she's stuck at the amusement arcade on a late shift, so her friends decide to surprise her, but a masked killer dressed as Mickey Mouse decides to play a game of his own with them which she must survive. James Bailey told Bloody Disgusting, the Mousetrap film is famously the first horror film to use the Mickey Mouse character from Steamboat Willie. I mean, what director... I'm sorry to start off on a rant. I know some people might find my ranting amusing, but what director talks of their film as if it's already got notoriety, it's already famous? So Jamie Bailey, director, had said to Bloody Disgusting, the Mousetrap film is famously the first horror film to use the Mickey Mouse character from Steamboat Willie. We just wanted to have fun with it all. I mean, it's Steamboat Willie's Mickey Mouse murdering people. It's ridiculous. We ran with it and we had fun doing it, and I think it shows. Sophie McIntosh, Callum Suick, Allegra Nosita, Ben Harris, Damir Kovic, Mackenzie Mills, Nick Biscompeck, and Simon Phillips star in The Mousetrap. The film comes courtesy of Into Frame Productions from partners Jamie Bailey and Simon Phillips. Yeah, we know my kind of opinion or bias to be blatant about it when it comes to this approach. You know, oh, it's in the public domain, let's make a horror film version of it. It's just lazy. I mean, it probably is fun, and I'm sure there are people that enjoy it. You know, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey did huge money. There's going to be people that are just, you know, just gorehounds and like the shtick of it, and that's fine. You know, I just want to make it clear, when I have a dislike for something, it does not mean I'm ragging on people that dislike it. I feel that I always have to kind of specify that because I come from the wrestling background, not as in a wrestler at all, no way, but in terms of doing Ministry of Slam for a little while, on and off here and there. And one of the things that you find in the wrestling fan base, and you do get it to a degree in horror, I think it's the same with any sort of fan base, is the toxicity of the fan base. And with wrestling, it's more so, oh, I like this company. Oh, you're an idiot. How can you like that? You're just absolutely dumb. You're just a shill for that corporate whatever. I actually like this other company. The other fan base then goes, oh, you just like indie boys that flip around and just do stunts and it's just ridiculous and there's no storytelling, blah, blah, blah. When I say that I dislike this practice or these sort of films, it's in no way a remark on anyone that enjoys it. It's purely my opinion. If you enjoy these films, then that's completely fine. That's great. Whatever you get enjoyment out of when it comes to horror films or wrestling, whatever, you know, it doesn't mean it's a knock on someone else if you like it and they don't, or they don't like it, or they like it and you don't, you know. So fans looking forward to The Mousetrap, please don't be put off by my distaste for this approach to filmmaking. Who knows? It may be good. I mean, if it's anything like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, then for me, I have no high anticipation for that. Anyway, let's move on. Another new indie horror movie released this past Tuesday, Ganymede, is described as a campy southern gothic thriller from life and creative partners Colby Holt and Sam Probst. Ganymede, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, made its world premiere at the 41st Reeling International Film Festival, where the film took home the Audience Award for Best Narrative Feature Film. At the Chattanooga Film Festival, the film won the Pride Award. It's now available on VOD outlets. In Ganymede, when a small-town wrestling star develops a crush on an openly gay classmate, he begins to be stalked by a grotesque creature that invades his thoughts, all the while struggling to live up to the standards set by his legacy-obsessed dad. The LGBTQ plus thriller stars Jordan Dow, Pablo Castelblanco, David Koechner from Anchorman, Robin Lively, Joe Crest, and Marissa Reyes. Yeah, I mean, it's a thriller. I imagine the creature could be some sort of like metaphor, potentially. I haven't watched the trailer, but it could be like a metaphor for the feelings of oppression, maybe. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. But that is now out as of Tuesday. Check it out if you fancy. Next up, from writer-director Tillman Singer is Neon's Cuckoo, starring Hunter Schafer from Euphoria, which I've never seen, which will be released exclusively in theatres on Friday, August 9th, today. So I might have to try and get down to that, see that next week. I'm watching a rom-com tonight at the cinema, which will be my first time watching one in the cinema, but, you know, my fiancé has watched a lot of horror films that have scared her with me at the cinema, so it is literally only fair that I return the favour. I don't think this will scare me. Anyway, Cuckoo. Reluctantly, a 17-year-old Gretchen leaves her American home to live with her father, who has just moved into a resort in the German Alps with his new family. Arriving at their future residence, they are greeted by Mr. Koenig, her father's boss, who takes an inexplicable interest in Gretchen's mute half-sister Alma. Something doesn't seem right in this tranquil vacation paradise. Gretchen is plagued by strange noises and bloody visions until she discovers a shocking secret that also concerns her own family. Dan Stevens, Jessica Henwick, Martin Koskas, Greta Fernandez, and Jan Bluthard also star in Cuckoo. So Cuckoo, I've seen the one trailer. I think that's enough for me. I do want to watch it. Hype levels are like 7 to 8. Just in terms of, I haven't heard that much about it recently. When it was announced, I kind of thought, okay, you know, it had that initial buzz around it, kind of similar to Longlegs. I saw the trailer and I thought, okay, I like the look of this. I don't want to know too much. Similar to Longlegs, but kind of, I suppose the comparison is this is now out now. Longlegs had a lot of buzz about it, like a lot of press, you know, saying scariest film in decades, blah blah blah. Comparisons to Silence of the Lambs in the weeks going up to its release. This feels, at least from a UK perspective, quite quiet. I don't know. I know it's out in America because Blood Disgusting is an American site as of today. But I don't know if it's out in the UK yet. So I'm going to have a quick little look. So Cuckoo, showtimes for cinemas. Let's go with my local, which I won't say just in case people are scary. Release date in the UK, 24th of August. Shit. Okay, so we've got to wait a couple of weeks. That doesn't seem fair. And I guess the irritant about that for me is that if there are big moments in this film, if there's big surprises, that's going to get ruined on social media. Now, there's a discussion when it comes to people spoiling things on social media or discussing how long do you wait until you can have open discussions about key moments? The argument could be the film's only just come out in the last few weeks, month, whatever. Not everyone can get down to the cinema to see it. The other argument can be, it's a big talking point. The film has been out for a week. Avoid social media if you don't want to watch it. You will get dicks that on opening day of a cinema, they'll be filming in the cinema or sharing clips, and it's like, that's just absolute knobhead behaviour. But, I mean, Wolverine and Deadpool and Wolverine, for example, stars and part of the cast and crew of the film. The film's only been out for 2 weeks now, I want to say. A week, 2 weeks. And whole scenes are being shared, like, you know, HD, 4K quality scenes are being shared on social media by the people involved in the film. I get it's a marketing thing, but for me, I was fortunate to see it within the first few days of opening. Tons of surprises, and I really enjoyed that. I like going into films fairly blind, not knowing too much, and just being in the moment and the experience. If I hadn't been able to get down to the cinema and see it, you know, within a couple of days of release, I'd have been a bit pissed seeing full scenes on social media. Because, yes, you can avoid things. You don't go looking for things. But if people are showing in your recommendations and sharing things, it's just, I think a week should be the general, assumed rule. But my point being, this is coming out today in America. We've got a few weeks to wait till it comes out in the UK. How much of this experience is potentially going to be ruined for me? Or do I avoid going on all social media for 2 weeks? I like not doom scrolling, but I like scrolling like Instagram Reels and looking at the news and stuff. So a little bit irritating that. Next up, Neil Marshall did Dog Soldiers, The Descent and Hellboy, returns this week with Duchess, a rated R action thriller from Saban Films that will be hitting VOD outlets on Friday, August 9th. In the film, Duchess, Charlotte Kirk, a small-time crook, tries to enter the treacherous underworld of diamond trafficking and ends up left for dead when a deal goes wrong. Determined to seek retribution, she launches into an unwavering pursuit for vengeance. Neil Marshall directed and co-wrote the screenplay with Charlotte Kirk. Philip Winchester, Colm Meaney, Hoyge Fortuna, Colin Eggleston, Stephanie Beecham, Sean Pertwee, David Chavez, Boris Martinez, Alex Morgan, and Jan Tuel also star. So, the name Neil Marshall, for a long time kind of associated with quality, dark horror with a tinge of action. I don't know when things started to drop off. Like, Dog Soldiers and The Descent are real standouts in horror. They're very different films, but they both have moments that are just iconic, I think it's fair to say. Hellboy got a lot of hate, but I really think that was kind of unfair. I don't think the film is terrible. It's forgettable. It's no more than a 7 out of 10 out of push. 6 out of 10 I think is probably more. I don't know if I even know if I reviewed it. I don't even know if I was doing the show at the time, but it's fine. It's just kind of forgettable. Like David Harbour's in it. He's good. It's just it doesn't really compare to the Guillermo del Toro films. And I'm not a huge Hellboy fan. I think they're fine. But it always has that comparison, and it got slated in the reviews. Maybe that's when it dropped off. But he's done a few films that I haven't seen. But we watched The Lair a little while ago, reviewed it on the show. It was on Shudder. And it's... I don't know if he's going through that stage of his directing career where the budgets are getting smaller. And that does happen. You look at like early John Carpenter versus later John Carpenter, like Ghosts of Mars and then The Ward. And you can tell that technology is advancing, but budgets are getting bigger, but the budgets available for John Carpenter were getting smaller. And so things kind of had a added look of cheapness, like Escape from LA, Ghosts of Mars for Johnny C. Decent enough, but not great. And one of the things that always stands out in those films is the CGI is terrible. And with Neil Marshall, The Lair had some okay moments, but it just felt more like a made-for-TV film than a theatrical film. I also don't know if he's potentially in danger of going down the Rob Zombie route, because it does feel like his last few films, his wife or fiance, girlfriend, Charlotte Kirk, is the front and center. I don't remember her being a bad actress in The Lair. That's the only film I've seen her in. But one of the complaints of Rob Zombie is, why is the star always your wife? Like, you're kind of limiting yourself to a certain range. I wonder if that's potentially the same thing going on here. I don't know. It's an awkward one. You don't want to lambast people for working with their spouse, because that's got to be quite cool. Like Mike Flanagan and his partner, they always work together, but it's in varying roles. It's not always the main star. I don't know. It always seems a bit like nepotism. Don't know if that's the correct term when it's a spouse and not a child, but same sort of thing. Haven't seen the trailer for this. Plot seems okay. It seems more thriller than horror. But Neil Marshall. I'm hoping he can right the ship and get back into being a big name in horror. It doesn't feel like it's going that way, which is a shame. And then next up, evil has new depths in Federico Zampaglione's upcoming horror movie The Well, which puts Terrifier 2 and Terrifier 3 star Lauren Levera into another bloody battle for survival. The Well first arrives in select theatres on Friday 9th before arriving on digital and on demand September 3rd via Uncorked Entertainment. The Well stars Lauren Levera as Lisa Gray, a budding art restorer who travels to a small Italian village to bring a medieval painting back to its former glory, unaware of the danger from an evil curse and a monster born of myth and brutal pain. On behalf of her father, a young American art restorer travels to a remote Italian village to bring a medieval painting back to its former glory. Okay, same sort of line. There she meets a beautiful but aging duchess and her troubled young daughter, who warns her that the painting is cursed and that she must leave before she falls prey to an evil witch who drinks the blood of tourists to achieve eternal life. Kind of sounding like a Stuart Gordon, H.P. Lovecraft adaptation, or, like a Full Moon production, which isn't a bad thing. I enjoy those. Some of them. We did the Full Moon retro review a while ago, and some of the films I watch are absolutely hilarious. The Well was directed by Italian pop star Federico Zampaglione, who co-wrote the script with Stefano Massi. Starring alongside Levera is Claudio Guerini, Giovanni Lombardo Radice, Taylor Zodek, Linda Zampaglione, Jonathan Dillon King, Lorenzo Renzi, Gianluigi Calvani, Yassini Fedel, Melanie Gaidos, Stefano Martinelli, and Courage OVRE. Now, will we have this in the cinema in the UK? It's got a limited cinematic release in America, select theatres. Will it be coming out in the UK? The Well UK cinema release. The Well release date. Film news. The Well, where to watch and stream online. Okay, that's a different film. So I'm having to stop and look out my window. There's like an overwhelming smell of burning. I just need to check that my computer is not on fire. I'm going to close my window, even though it's roasting hot, just to make sure if it's outside. Either that or I'm having a stroke. No, I think it was outside. God, that filled my nostrils. So yeah, we don't have The Well coming to the UK cinema release, which is a shame. And that's it for the new films in the release. Let's move on to some video gaming news. So first-person psychological horror game The Occultist has been announced for 2025. Trailer is available online. This comes from Mike Wilson. Daedalic Entertainment is dipping into the occult with developer Delors' upcoming first-person narrative-driven psychological horror game in The Occultist, set for a 2025 release on PS5, Xbox, and PC on Steam. The Occultist will be making an appearance at this month's Gamescom. The story centers around paranormal investigator Alan Rebels, who travels to the enigmatic island of Godstone, determined to uncover the truth behind his father's mysterious disappearance. However, Alan does not travel alone. He carries with him his mystical pendulum, an object of unknown origin that accompanied him on all his past paranormal investigations. Godstone was inhabited until 1950 by an infamous macabre cult that performed disturbing experiments and cruel rituals. No one has ever set foot on the island since, until today. Using his paranormal talents, Alan must interact with the ominous souls that seem to remain in the foreboding streets and buildings left on Godstone, or avoid them at all cost, should they be wrathful. Central to the game's mechanics in The Occultist is Rebel's Mystic Pendulum, which has 5 unique mechanics to interact with and manipulate the environment. That will be key to solving the various puzzles you'll encounter, as well as you having to utilize stealth tactics to avoid drawing unwanted attention on your mission. As such, the game has a heavy emphasis on survival horror, where you'll experience tense exploration, atmospheric environments, and a gripping personal narrative. It's all wrapped up in an original soundtrack by composer Pepe Herrero. Now, I have checked out the trailer. There is no gameplay, so it doesn't really give too much away. Can't really comment too much. It's a decent-looking trailer, quite cinematic, but without seeing what the actual gameplay is like, it's kind of difficult to gauge how much this will interest me. Survival horror is it's a bit of a tipping board as to whether I'll like it or just be like, nah, I'm just useless. So yeah, there's interest, but I'm not completely hooked just yet. Need to see what the game looks like. Next up, The Return of the Living Dead legal battle has begun. So this is from John Squires. One of the greatest horror comedies of all time, Dan O'Bannon's 1985 movie The Return of the Living Dead, ended up launching a franchise that today includes 5 total movies, but it's been nearly 20 years since the direct-to-video release of 4th and 5th installments, Return of the Living Dead Necropolis and Return of the Living Dead Rave to the Grave. What's the latest on the franchise, you might be wondering? Well, we had learned just about a year ago that rights holders Living Dead Media were planning a Return of the Living Dead reboot with Steve Walsh attached to direct. This information gleaned from the company's official website. That website, it seems, is no longer online. Living Dead Media said last year, "Our reboot of Return of the Living Dead will expand the existing world created by the original 5 films, while staying true to the R-rated sci-fi horror dark comedy roots adored by fans of the cult classic around the world for the last 35 years. The company also noted on their official website at the time, "We are excited to resurrect this storied franchise for current fans and new generations of zombies fans." The plot on this one thickens this week, with Deadline reporting today that there's now a legal dispute over the rights to the Return of the Living Dead. According to Deadline's report, A lawsuit over the rights to the intellectual property of the 1985 horror comedy The Return of the Living Dead has been filed today in Los Angeles Superior Court. The company that filed the lawsuit is Living Dead Media LLC, and it's been filed against a new company titled ROTLD Originals LLC that was formed on July 7th, 2024. Oddly enough, this company was formed by the Return of the Living Dead star Beverly Dawn Hartley, aka Beverly Randolph, and Living Dead Media says she has no actual ownership rights. Living Dead Media claims that the newly formed ROTLD Originals LLC is attempting to interfere with active and existing contracts between Living Dead Media and its licensees. The lawsuit states, simply being an actor in a film does not grant or convey any particular rights to that character or any other character or any rights to the original film. Any derivative works or related intellectual property. Miss Hartley has no rights, title, or interest in the original film. Neither Miss Hartley, ROTLD, nor any of the other purported members have any rights whatsoever in any of the characters' merchandise that is being sold by these licensees. Oh, Jesus. Living Dead Media, according to court documents, owns the copyright in and to the original screenplay and the underlying script for the Return of the Living Dead film, the original film, and other trademarks, including a United States registered trademark for Return of the Living Dead and other intellectual property related to the original film. It is axiomatic that LDM has the legal right to license and enter into other agreements related to its intellectual property. While the Living Dead Media LLC website seems to be offline at the moment, an official merchandise shop operated by the same company does appear to be active currently. So this is interesting. Return of the Living Dead is one of those franchises that is a lot of fun. I still don't know if I've seen the second film. The second film doesn't seem to be quite as readily available. I mean, while we're talking about it, I'll do my usual due diligence and head straight to Amazon. Return of the Living Dead 2. But we've, there's like a Spanish import. There's a collector's edition Blu-ray, which is an import. There's a DVD for £25. No, thank you. Yeah, it doesn't seem to... Oh, okay, well, I can... If I wanted to, I can rent it for $3.49 on Prime. So I'm going to add that to my watch list so I don't forget. Yeah, okay, that's fine. $3.49 is chump change. So we watched the original film a little while ago on stream when we used to do RIP, our watch parties. And one of the last films we watched... maybe even the last film, was Return of the Living Dead 3. A lot of fun. I've never seen the 4th and 5th straight to DVD films. I imagine, potentially they are Return of the Living Dead purely in name only. One of the things that kind of sticks out with Return of the Living Dead 1 and 3, the ones that I've seen, is the style of the zombies. Brain eating, it's kind of campy, it's quite funny, quite gory, and you've also got Tarman. They're unique. I mean, Tarman I don't think's in the third one, but I know he's in the first two. I don't know. I don't anticipate that the 4th and 5th had that, but I could well be proven wrong. Interesting, as it says in the title. I'd like to see a return of the Return of the Living Dead, but I guess it just has to be... It has to make sense, and it has to have that same feel back. Like, I don't want to watch a sequel that just has the name and that's it. Next up in the news, Reebok is releasing limited edition Alien Romulus sneakers, which do look pretty cool, actually. As you may have noticed, as this comes from John Squires again, as you may have noticed in the film's promo materials, Kaylee Spaney's character in Alien Romulus rocks a modified version of the futuristic Reebok Alien Stompers worn by Ripley and Bishop in Aliens, and we've learned that Reebok is releasing limited edition replicas. Reebok and 20th Century Studios have joined forces for the Reebok Alien Romulus $170 sneaker built for the legendary sci-fi film franchise's next installment, Alien Romulus. Reebok and the Alien franchise share a long-standing history of collaborations dating back to James Cameron's Aliens, which featured a futuristic pair of Reeboks memorably worn by Ellen Ripley. The shoes were specifically designed for the movie, and replicas were in more recent years released by Reebok, becoming highly sought after by horror fans and sneaker collectors. For the release of Alien Romulus, the storied franchise is set to reignite thrills with the commercial release of a unique and compelling piece of footwear that will be worn throughout the forthcoming film. Pulled from the archive and built upon Reebok Basketball's iconic BP4002 frame, the Reebok Alien Romulus was designed to battle big bugs, featuring an all-leather upper, distressed film-worn finish, a Whale and Yutani logo on the tongue and heel, EVA foam midsole, and a solid rubber cup sole with a grippy traction pattern for grip, among other Easter eggs. The Reebok X Alien collaboration stands out today as one of the most iconic mashups between film and footwear, with the 1986 film-worn Alien Stomper boot maintaining a grail status in contemporary sneaker culture. The brands would come together for additional product collaborations in 2016 for the 30th anniversary of Aliens, and 2019-20 for the 40th anniversary of the original 1979 film. You can purchase the Reebok Alien Romulus $170 sneaker beginning August 27th from Reebok.com. 20th Century Studios Alien Romulus opens exclusively in theaters August 16. The box for them does look pretty cool as well. Yeah, I mean, they look cool. I'm not a sneakerhead. I mean, funnily enough, they are high tops, which are more my preferred type of shoe. But I wouldn't be spending that much money on trainers. I just never have. And two, while they have that authentic look, you know, they look worn, they look like they do in the film. If you were going to buy them to actually wear them, they do just look dirty by design. So, yeah, I think if you walked around and people didn't know that they were from the film, they'd think, Jesus Christ, clean your shoes, mate. So that's, you know, I imagine if you're spending that much on these trainers, they would just be going on some sort of display cabinet. And that's perfectly fine. Next up, from John Squires, Sleeping Beauty's Massacre, retitled Ouija Castle for VOD release this week. Horror movies based on public domain properties are pretty hot right now. But it seems a lot of filmmakers are messing around and finding out when wading into these waters. Much the same way Mickey's Mousetrap, was retitled The Mousetrap for its VOD release this week. The film, formerly titled Sleeping Beauty's Massacre, has a new title for its own release. Now titled Ouija Castle, the Sleeping Beauty-inspired horror movie is now available on VOD outlets, including Prime Video. Yes, Ouija Castle. You can watch the new trailer online. From the team behind Cinderella's Curse comes Ouija Castle, a horror retelling of the classic tale of Sleeping Beauty that was directed by Louisa Warren. In the film, the beautiful Princess Thalia is thrown to ruins after her father's mysterious death. She lives with Prince Edison, who she's in love with but can no longer marry since losing her status. Queen Velma wants the kingdom for herself and will use her dark powers and use of the occult to take over at any means necessary. Velma casts Thalia into a deep sleep to never wake, till one day she does and her web of lies start to fall around her. A violent twist after violent twist, with gory and graphic deaths will ensue. Laura Hirostova stars in Ouija Castle as Princess Thalia, along with Benedict Clark, Sophie Rankin, Charlotte Coleman, and Yvonne Kerwin. Director Louisa Warren had teased a few months back, this film will flip everything as you know on its head. It is savage, dark, and utterly horrifying. I am setting out to create the most uncomfortable horror experience to date. There will be lies, gore, and a big massacre. If you look back at the original material, there's so much to play with. Okay, so, I'm assuming Queen Velma, who dabbles in the occult, must use a Ouija board at some point in the film. Otherwise, the title, which has obviously been changed into Ouija Castle, makes absolutely no sense. I wonder what had caused the change of title. I wonder if that had been like a cease and desist, or if that had been just the distributors going, no, we're not, you know. If you want to get this film out there, you need to change the title. And I mean, will I watch it if it appears on Prime and I have nothing else to watch? Maybe. It's a, public domain horror. We've talked about that earlier. I'm kind of sick of talking about that. We'll move on. Finally in the news. New book, Seasonal Screams, A History of Holiday Horror, releasing this Halloween. Sign me up. This comes from John Squires. The new genre retrospective book from author Adrian Rowe, Seasonal Screams, A History of Holiday Horror, will release just in time for Halloween, literally, on October 31st, 2020. Now, if I can pre-order that, I will, because this book looks badass. Badass, I tell you. Let's just quickly go to Amazon, and then regular service will resume. Nope, not yet available. to pre-order. I must remember. So, the book features exclusive cover artwork by Graham Humphreys, who is quite a legend in terms of horror artwork, which is available to see online. Seasonal Screams, a story of holiday horror, will take you on a terrifying journey through your favourite seasons, with contributors and interviewees including Neil Marshall, Ellie Cornell, Jeff Lieberman, Linnea Quigley, Daniel Stam, Melissa Anson, and more. The press release previews whether it's the dry autumnal leaves that shatter under your feet with every step during Halloween, or the cold, crisp snow turning the world white over Christmas. There has always been a special relationship with film and the changing seasons, or more specifically, with the public holidays that's celebrated during these traditional and familiar dates marked by default on our calendars. To some, these moments represent something far more profound, an annual reminder of where we are, who we were with, as the memories of yesteryear are invoked during holidays that we have become accustomed to since childhood. For varying reasons, there has always been a creative bond between film and these annual events, for almost as long as the medium has existed. We can trace holiday-themed movies back to 1898 with the release of George Albert Smith's Santa Claus, which is believed to be the first ever Christmas movie. Smith would also direct the short The Old Maid's Valentine in 1900, which would use February the 14th to deliver a surprise. Victor Stolstrom's silent movie The Phantom Carriage, 1921, would use New Year's Eve as the backdrop for its haunting premise. While I always get that word wrong. While holidays such as Halloween and Easter have been channeled through film on countless occasions. There's a lot more to this, quite a lot more, which I can't be bothered to read, but this does look like a pretty good book, and the artwork is really quite cool. We all love a seasonal Scream. You know, there's obviously been tons of Halloween-focused horrors. We recently reviewed the what was called April Fool's Day and got changed to Slaughter High. Christmas is coming with Terrifier 3 and Black Christmas, plenty of others. Silent Night, Deadly Night. Valentine's Day has had a thriller, as Friday, Valentine's Day. Yeah, Valentine's Day has had a thriller. So plenty to look at. So I would be interested in getting that book. I'm going to have to make some sort of reminder for myself to keep an eye out for it when it does come out. May have to get it imported. But that brings us to the end of the horror news, he says. That was the news.
This is God.
Bosh. Right, straight in, we're going to talk about the BBC News piece on this film, The Bench. The Scottish horror film, 17 years in the making, from Jonathan Geddes at BBC. So, I won't read the whole thing, because I read it earlier to myself. There's a Scottish film that has finally been released, 17 years after the filming first got underway. It's called The Bench. I don't know why it's called The Bench. I'll say that straight off from the start. Take this as part of the review. But writer-director Sean Wilkie had spoken to BBC Scotland News that he's got a mixture of being pleased, nervous and relieved now that the film can be seen by the public. The film's been inspired by Halloween, The Hills Have Eyes, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre does, feature as a influence very heavily in this film. But it began being filmed in Loch Winnock in 2007 using a cabin owned by friends of the film's director of photography. For indoor filming, the Caves venue in Edinburgh was used, with Drumpellier County Park used for occasional outdoor shots. The cast included Two Doors Down star Joy McAvoy and Matt McClure from American horror show Penny Dreadful. The first 2 weeks on location were fine, but we couldn't keep that up, reflects Sean in the BBC article. Basically, filming in Scotland, especially outdoor shots, is a bit problematic due to the weather. They basically had setback after setback when it came down to having to film on odd weekends here and there to complete it. Which, as I mentioned at the start of the show, I fully understand that. And as time went on, people then aren't available, and when they do come back and time is passing, people's appearances change, and that is noticeable. People put on and lose weight. People's haircuts change. People's hairlines change. But it became, the budget, the money for the budget had gone. New funding wasn't available. Over time, the director had to take on the editing himself. And by the time sort of being finished, money was owed to people that helped him out to finish making the film. So while paying back that money, the film essentially just stayed in a hard drive in the drawers because of just kind of feeling a bit done with it after all that time and stress. And I completely get that. I mean, when we did the first Harvest of the Dead, we're filming it on weekends because we've all got full-time jobs. Got to earn that cheddar somehow. Got to pay the bills to get that bacon. And so filming at the weekend, when you're filming something outdoors, which Harvest of the Dead predominantly was, you're relying on the weather. You can't rely on the weather. The weather changes like anything. So you get those difficulties straight away. Time goes on. People then aren't available. The weather's looking good. 5 of the 6 people are available. The 6th one isn't. Okay, can we film anything with the 5? Yeah, okay, we can film this person's death. And, for Harvest of the Dead, the seasons were changing throughout the film. Sometimes it was blaring sun, other times it was like wet, damp spring. And I do understand that. I do get the pain there. But this has been a work of passion for the director. And the film's basically been almost complete from 2016. So there's just been a long time where it's kind of been sat around. Now, part of the release mentioned that the film is now available on Prime. So I have a feeling he might have just self-released it directly to Prime. Well, there's no problem doing that. If you don't want to go the distribution route, then if you kind of want to potentially almost maximize your potential for profits from streaming, you can self-release it. Now, when I say that, I do mean that very vaguely because revenue from streaming on Prime is pitiful, but I guess depending on how many views you get, then it could earn you a little pretty penny here and there. But we'll jump into our review. We've got a couple more to do our usual. I'll talk about the film, I'll talk about the highs, lows, give you my score out of 10. So it's written by and directed by Sean Wilkes, stars Jennifer Barn, Matt McClure, Chris Somerville. So there is a breakdown, a car breakdown, a kind invitation. This is the blurb on IMDb. A cabin with a bloody past. Alex Summer and her newfound friends face a nightmarish reality as they are picked off one by one, drawn to the sinister bench below. Okay, so I see. Okay, when I finished watching the film, my first thought was, I don't know why it's called The Bench. That doesn't really feel like it's made clear. Okay, I get it's not a bench as in a sitting on bench, but it's like a workbench. Okay, that wasn't that clear to me. Reading the blurb, I get that now why it's called The Bench, but yeah, I have to admit my first thought was, don't get the title. So it's a group of teens who, I think even when filming started, can't have been teens. They must have been mid-20s. But they talk about themselves as a bunch of kids. I mean, one of them is this tall ginger lad with a, not to speak disparaging on appearance, but he has a bit of belly. And he visibly ages as the filming goes on. There is another actor who looks quite young and fresh-faced in some scenes. In other scenes, they are having issues keeping the haircut that they had from the earlier scenes, which is just a polite way of saying what can happen to, and I'm pointing at myself here, a lot of people, men and women. It's just nature. It's not nice, but it's one of those noticeable things, and it is going to happen when filming is over a number of years. You can't help that, especially when there's no budget. It's not like you've got a wig department. But this group, they are looking to go camping, and they come across a woman who's had a car breakdown, and she says, "Oh, I've got a cabin that I've inherited. We could all go there. That'd be cool." So from the location of this van, you get the Texas Chainsaw Massacre influence. Group dynamic, going to a location, you know, things aren't quite what they seem. They hear this story about a tale of a man who lives in the woods that kills people whenever they go there. So initially, the plot does seem a kind of threadbare. I mean, I had this fondness throughout, just because there is that kinship of making a film from nothing. And, you know, some of the actors are decent, some aren't, you know, just aren't so good. But again, you have to have that appreciation when watching something like this. You don't have to, but if you've been through that experience, you kind of understand it a bit more and have a bit more leniency, I suppose, is an appropriate way to look at it. The kills are pretty bloody, pretty violent. There's an inventive use of a winch vice, which is pretty good. And as the story does progress, and everyone's just getting mutilated left, right, and centre, there is some depth to some of the characters. There is a nice callback / reveal in the finale. And while that then does lead to a coda which connects to the start of the film, it does also highlight how threadbare the plot is. And you could say, when you look back at the classic films of the 70s and 80s, well, every decade, part of horror sometimes is a threadbare script with, you know, good gory violence, decent music. I mean, the music is pretty by the numbers here, doesn't really stand out so much. But on the whole, like, I did kind of enjoy the film. And it's an hour and 15, so it doesn't take up too much of your time. The kills are decent, and I did kind of feel that we don't really see that much horror from Scotland that I'm aware of. You know, we get a lot of UK-based horror, we get some Irish horror, but Scotland and also Wales, I don't really see that much in the horror realm from, and I'd be keen to see more. I'll have a quick look if Sean Wilkie's done any other horror work. The Bench worked on the TV show The Graduates. Are We Being Unreasonable, which is a podcast. No, bits and bobs here and there. But I did generally enjoy it for what it is, and that is a passion project. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I don't think it stands out enough to kind of warrant going higher, but I think it does a decent amount with what it can do, and that is a nice little slice of horror independently. So 5 out of 10 for The Bench. Next up, The Bellkeeper. Now, this surprised me. So this was on Prime, so it didn't cost me a penny. Love that. 2023 American action horror film, directed and edited by Colton Tran and written by Joe Davison. Released in the United States by Screen Media Rights on October 13th, 2023. So the plot on this is a team of documentary filmmakers and friends go on a camping trip to try and debunk the myth about a killer who is summoned after the ringing of a bell. So stars, Nick Theuer, Bailey Castle, MMA legend Randy Couture, Kathleen Kenny, Reed Miller, Mike Manning, also Chaz Bono, who is the son of Sonny Bono and Cher, and he's actually quite funny at this, and Bonnie Aarons, who has been in a few things, played Valak in the Conjuring universe. I thought I recognised her. Very unique appearance, and also was the bum in Mulholland Drive, which is the kind of most scary scene of the film. So yeah, she's got a unique face. So I kind of initially thought, okay, this is going to be some dirge, but it looks like the poster artwork looks good enough. Let's give it a go. It is actually quite fun. It's typical group of teens where they're all a mixture of the jocks and the dumb bimbos, going on this trip along with the brother of one of the characters, who's a bit more withdrawn and, you know, isn't a typical alpha. He'd be described as a beta, but just likes to sort of keep to himself and, you know, gets involved in geek culture and likes to get high. They go on this little trip and they end up at this this bell that should not be rung. There's a whole myth about that. typically what happens. They get to the bell, they ring the bell, and we're then introduced to Randy Couture, who is dressed like all 1850s garb or 1600s, whatever, old-timey with an axe, who's chasing after the group. But it's not all as it seems, because what's actually occurring is a little bit more Evil Dead-esque, in that if you rung the bell or heard the bell ring, bit by bit, your ears start bleeding, and you become sort of almost possessed, almost like a deadite, and go on a killing spree. Whilst this film is low budget and it does kind of look like a sci-fi film, a sci-fi channel film, the performances are all quite humorous. Like the jock characters just have this tinge of humour to them where, yeah, they're dicks, but they're not just completely unlikable. And all of the cast are actually do quite a nice job of being warm, and I did quite like that. Seeing Randy Couture in horror, I don't know how many other films he's done. I know he was in The Expendables, the first 3 Expendables. I don't know if he was in the latest one. I'm just going to have a quick look at his page. Lots and lots about his MMA career. So it's Bellkeeper, Warriors of Peace, Outlaw Johnny Black. Oh, he was in Expendables 4, which I've not seen yet. Tons of things, tons and tons. Oh, he's in Hell's Kitchen, apparently. And The Scorpion King 2, Rise of a Warrior. But yeah, I do like Randy Couture. He's a pretty cool guy. And the kills in this aren't over the top. It's not uber gory. It's more, I guess, peril and fights. But it is just quite amusing. And Chaz Bono, I didn't realise who that was. He is quite a standout, and this is Ranger Carlson. He is actually pretty funny in this film, pretty hilarious in places. So I think this is one of those films that could easily just end up being completely missed and overlooked. But I think that would be kind of unfair to it. I had a pretty good time watching this. I mean, the music isn't really a standout. It's kind of a by-the-by. It definitely has that feel of a sci-fi made-for-TV film. You know, quite generic music in that regard. But I think it's the performances that stand out in this, where just it's shot pretty well. It's only really in one location and a bit on the road, but the majority of it isn't this this kind of hallowed ground where this mysterious bell is. I enjoyed it though. I'm going to give it 6.5 out of 10. It doesn't quite reach 7. You know, I'm under no illusions that it's a better film than it was. But I got enjoyment out of it, you know. There's not that much to it, but the performances really make it quite enjoyable. 6.5 out of 10 for The Bellkeeper. And then finally, for our retro review, I watched on the Arrow player, Demonia. Demonia is a 1990 Italian horror film co-written and directed by Lucio Fulci. Screenplay was by Lucio Fulci and Piero Regnolia, starring Brett Halsey, Meg Register, Lino Salemini, and Christina Engelhardt. So I'll start reading into the plot. We won't try and read too much, give too much away. In Sicily in 1486, a mob of villagers tortured and crucified 5 nuns suspected of witchcraft in a chamber beneath their convent. At a séance in Toronto in 1990, Liz has a vision of the crucified nuns and falls screaming onto the floor. Several months later, Lisa and Professor Evans, a respected archaeologist, and her former professor, lead a survey team to ancient Greek ruins near the small town of Santa Rosalia, Sicily. The locals, including Porter and Turi, tell them to avoid a monastery's beautiful but ominous ruins that overlook the dig. Although Professor Evans reminds her that she should avoid any involvement with the supernatural after the séance in Toronto, Lisa is fascinated by the morbid rumours about what happened in the monastery. Ignoring Turi's angry rebuke, Lisa enters the monastery crypt. Convinced that there is another chamber behind a wall, she uses a pickaxe to break into a cavern containing the charred remains of the 5 nuns. But when Lisa tells Professor Evans what she has found, he angrily tells her to forget she saw anything. then the supernatural murders begin to take place. This was kind of a disappointing watch. Like, when I spotted it was on the Arrow player and I'd seen the artwork on the Arrow store previously for the Blu-ray release, I thought, okay, that looks kind of interesting. And then I saw it was a Lucio Fulci film, and I thought, okay, I do like me some Fulci. It felt like it took too long to move the story along. There's a lot of scenes of just rowdy archaeologists or workers singing along like kind of sea shanty tunes for long periods. It does focus a lot on these sexy time kills with this mysterious kind of ghost woman who lures in men with sexy time, but then kills them in various ways. As it does get further along, the violence does ramp up into your typical Fulci levels of violence. There is a particular bisecting kill which is pretty violent, but the budget does seem like it was a bit lower. Like, some of the gore effects are ambitious, but look worse than some of his 80s output. You know, like there's moments with, I think it's the bisecting kill, where like the makeup hasn't been fully applied to the prosthetics, so you've got like a really bad noticeable difference in skin tone. That might seem like nitpicking, but you didn't have those kind of noticeable issues in earlier Fulci work. So I don't know if that was a budget thing or becoming a bit lazy. I hate to say that because I don't want to badmouth the guy. But this isn't up there with his previous output. As the story goes, it's okay. The performances are pretty decent in it, but some of the characters are just quite irritating. Lisa is our kind of front and center, but I just found myself getting quite bored in places with this, which was a real shame because, you know, I'm a big fan of Zombie 2, as it's originally known, House by the Cemetery. Other than the kid in it is really irritating. City of the Living Dead and The Beyond, so the whole Gates of Hell trilogy is just chef's kiss. Like, City of the Living Dead and The Beyond are just way up there. And House by the Cemetery is great, but the kid, as I say, really annoying. Yeah, I was disappointed by Demonia, I have to admit. I think as a score, I'm going to give it a 6. The music is pretty good in Demonia, I should say. The music is pretty good. It's quite reminiscent of the Italian horror of that time, of like, you know, more like the early 80s. The kills are pretty good, but are also just a bit let down with some of the prosthetics. And I feel that that's a justified critique just because we haven't had that issue in earlier input or output, I should say. And the story's okay, it's not great. So I'm going to give Demonia 6 out of 10. You know, we'll maybe have to revisit one of the Gates of Hell trilogy for a retro review. I tried to focus my retro reviews on first time watches, but then there's some which have been, you know, second time like pieces. So maybe we'll revisit one of those because I don't want people who aren't familiar with Lucio Fulci to think, doesn't sound that good, because he's done some really good stuff. 6 out of 10 for Demonia. Anyway, Ghouls and Fiends, that is it for another edition of the Ministry of Horror. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, whatever it is on the platform of choice. This goes out on YouTube. It also goes out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to give it a follow, share, listen on both platforms, whatever you want. Get the word out there. We have a TikTok, which is ministry.of.horror. Just search Ministry of Horror. I put clips of the show on there, along with some book talk recommendations. I'm an avid reader. I'm almost finished You Like It Darker, the latest Stephen King collection of short stories. Some of them are very, very good. None of them are bad, but some of them are exceptionally quite good. There's a sequel, sort of pseudo-sequel to Cujo in there, which is pretty good. It's one of the longest stories in the book. But I'm going to be finishing that up pretty soon. And also, yeah, just other little bits and bobs. Be sure to check that out. If you like Instagram, I don't really put much horror content on there. Maybe I should do, but that is Tez Elliott, TEZZELLIOTT. And for live streams, the show goes out live every other week. We also do occasionally now, I can say that, video game streams. So check out twitch.tv/Tezius, TEZZIUS. Give the channel a follow. If you want to give it a subscribe, you can, but I don't put much out on there, so I would completely understand. Ooh, that is it for the plugin. Have a great rest of the week, guys. Watch lots of horror, play lots of horror, read lots of horror. Just whatever you do, make it horror. And I will catch you guys later on. Goodbye.